May 1944. Over the skies of Burma, where jungles stretch all the way to the horizon and low clouds hide every danger, a mission that seemed familiar quickly became the harshest test in the lives of those involved. There was no sign in advance. There was no time to prepare for the worst. There were only decisions made in an instant, in a sky full of movement, where every second that passed could change the fate of a person. This is the true story of Lieutenant Phil Adair, a fighter pilot of the United States Army Air Forces, and a day when the skies over Burma tested the limits of courage, experience, and the spirit of comradeship to the very end. In 1944, the Burma theater was considered one of the harshest areas of the Second World War. Unlike the open skies in Europe, Burma was a place where dense jungle covered the ground, steep mountains hid inside the clouds, and the weather changed suddenly almost every hour. For pilots, this meant that they not only had to watch the enemy, but also had to constantly be on guard against the environment around them. A small mistake in altitude, a late decision when approaching the clouds, or a moment of losing direction, all of it could lead to consequences that could not be reversed. In Burma, the Allied forces were cooperating with Chinese units trained by the Americans to stop the advance of the Japanese army in Southeast Asia. In the air, the pilot's mission was to support the ground forces, strike key targets, and hold control of the sky in extremely unfavorable conditions. On the morning of May 17, 1944, Lieutenant Phil Adair was leading a flight of 4 P-40 Warhawk fighters. His flight carried a special nickname, Burma Banshees. The P-40s were painted with snarling skulls on their noses, not only to make an impression, but also as a reminder of the spirit of not backing down of the men who flew them. Phil Adair was the most experienced pilot in the formation that day. Flying behind him were younger pilots, less experienced, men who were still learning how to face the real pressure of aerial combat. Among them was Lieutenant O'Connor, a young pilot from Oklahoma, whom Adair called by the affectionate name Little Okie. That morning, the mission of the flight was very clear: approach the combat area, strike Japanese ground targets, and support the Allied forces who were being pressed hard below. As the P-40s moved closer to the target area, Adair looked down beneath a thin layer of haze. Burma's jungle spread out below, seemingly quiet, but mixed into the deep green were small flashes and faint smoke that showed fighting was happening fiercely. The flight moved into attack formation. The P-40s lowered altitude one by one. Bombs were released. In an instant, the ground shook. Columns of smoke and dust rose up through the jungle canopy, marking the targets that had just been destroyed. The attack was effective. But when Adair pulled the nose of his aircraft up to leave the area, he saw what every pilot stays alert for. From above, small dots were quickly growing larger. Japanese fighter aircraft. Not 1 or 2 aircraft, 3 formations, more than 15 aircraft. They appeared with a clear altitude advantage and quickly deployed into formation. Instead of aiming at Adair, the leader, they focused on the P-40s behind, where the younger pilots were still carrying bombs and external fuel tanks, making the aircraft heavy and less agile. As the Japanese aircraft began to close in, Adair immediately warned over the radio. He realized that the greatest danger at that moment was heading toward O'Connor. Adair called directly to his wingman. He asked O'Connor to check the load, drop the bombs in the fuel tank, then turn right, find a way into the clouds to get away from the enemy's approach. O'Connor followed the order. The bombs fell away from the wings, but the external fuel tank did not detach. A small malfunction, but in this situation, it made the P-40 much heavier and far harder to maneuver. As the Japanese aircraft began to close in, O'Connor was forced to make sharp, evasive maneuvers. Adair saw 4 enemy aircraft and O'Connor's P-40 rush into a thick bank of cloud. He followed immediately. But when he came out of the cloud on the other side, O'Connor was no longer there. There was no radio signal. There was no clear sign in the sky. In that moment, Adair realized he had been separated from the flight. In the vast sky, he could not see any other P-40s, only enemy aircraft. When a formation of enemy fighters headed straight away toward him, Adair had to make a decision. He did not try to withdraw right away. Instead, he chose to close in. In the brief moments that followed, Adair's experience and his ability to control the aircraft became the key. He adjusted his direction, chose the timing, and used every small gap in the cloud-filled sky. One enemy aircraft did not have time to adjust its formation. Adair seized the chance, and then, one more time when the altitude advantage leaned toward him. But the advantage did not last long. Adair's aircraft had been affected. Some systems were no longer operating as they had at the start. Fuel was running down faster than expected. When Adair turned to find a way back, he saw more enemy aircraft appearing ahead. At this stage, he had no other choice. Adair decided to withdraw. The pursuit was tense. While trying to shake them, Adair saw a dense cloud bank ahead, with a massive rock outcrop rising through the clouds. It was an extremely dangerous area, but it was also the only chance. Adair adjusted his course and plunged into the clouds. For several tense seconds, he completely lost sight. Relying only on feel, experience, and calm, Adair guided the P-40 through the danger and came out on the other side. When he appeared again in clearer air, the sky behind him had gone quiet. The pursuit ended. Adair called on the radio. There was no reply. For the first time in his career, he believed he had lost the entire flight. He flew more slowly, scanning around. Then, through the thin haze ahead, a P-40 appeared. It was O'Connor. His aircraft was badly damaged. Many systems no longer worked, but the engine was still turning. Shortly after, Adair received a signal from Tom Rogers, another member of the flight, who was also struggling to keep a heavily affected P-40 in the air. Adair decided to lead both of them back to base. The landing was not simple. One aircraft had a landing gear problem. Another aircraft had difficulty controlling speed. Adair flew in front, kept contact, and guided each pilot to approach the runway. One by one, the P-40s touched down safely. Finally, Adair landed as well. That day, 4 aircraft took off, and 4 men returned. No map recorded what happened in the skies over Burma that day. No number could fully reflect the tension of those moments, but for the people involved, it was a day that could not be forgotten. Phil Adair did not remember that day because of the dangerous moments. He remembered it because of the men who flew with him. In war, sometimes what matters most is not confrontation or victory. It's bringing everyone home. And that is why this story has still been mentioned decades later, when the skies over Burma have returned to silence.